So Throne and Liberty is the next major MMORPG set to release, and it's just around the corner. If you're an MMO Andy, let's be real here, you're probably going to try it, especially since it's free. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys an updated review of the game because the game has really transformed in the past 10 months that it's been out. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you do find the video helpful. I'm getting super close to my first major goal of 100,000 subs, and I would appreciate your guys' support on this. Also, I am streaming on Twitch almost every single day. I'm going to be going pretty hard into the launch, so come follow me on that platform, and let's begin the video. Regardless of what you've seen or heard from Throne so far, know this game has undergone insane amounts of change in the 10 months it's been out, and chances are whatever it is that you heard or saw is likely outdated. Yes, even if you have personally played in the last beta test. As far as my experience goes, I've been playing and covering this game since before it even launched almost a year ago, and I've pretty much accomplished everything there is to accomplish in the game, including leading an alliance to win the first and biggest castle siege ever. I'm proudly sporting my prestigious First Legion title. With that out the way, let's dive into this so you know exactly what to expect with the latest version of Throne and Liberty. So what is Throne and Liberty? The TLDR, it's an open world fantasy medieval themed MMO that focuses around both PvP and PvE content with tab targeting combat at its core, but with optional action combat. Throne is a weapon-based class system where you can choose any 2 out of 7 weapons. NCSoft released Throne in December 2023, and since then, the game has undergone a multitude of changes and has transformed significantly since its start. For the better or worse, Throne had a pretty lackluster launch in Korea and never even maintained a top 10 ranking, despite it being NC's new flagship game. Before memeing on it though, keep in mind that all KR rankings you see are based off of PC bang numbers, and considering, I shit you not, over half of the population were, and almost still are, foreigners, the ranking for Throne specifically is not really reflected accurately compared to all the other KR games in the ranking that consist of probably at least 99% Korean players. Regardless, it still wasn't super popular in Korea, that is a fact, and this was largely in part due to the strike people were on when it came to NCSoft games, because quite frankly, they were just sick of their bullshit. Period. Bad monetization and predatory tactics. A lot of Korean content creators just bashed NCSoft before and after the launch, saying, well, the same thing people in the West are saying. This forced NCSoft into a more apologetic, we need to win you back type of vibe, and it's been like this since the start of the game. 9 months later, they still maintain this position, and in my personal opinion, they've done a relatively good job not crossing that line they previously had in games, and most importantly, listening to feedback and making relatively quick adjustments based off of it. The narrative was, it's only a matter of time before NCSoft makes that move, but to give credit where credit is due, they haven't made that move yet. But we'll see. TLDR, NCSoft has been on their redemption arc, probably because their stock price is at an all-time low. Switching gears now, originally Throne was essentially a PvP-only game that really locked you into guild-oriented activities. While the premier content is still PvP, NCSoft has added a huge emphasis on PvE content and creating better experiences for players in smaller, non-hardcore guilds. We'll be talking about the endgame loop here in a bit, but you can expect a lot more time being spent on PvE, and yes, you can be a PvE-only Andy now. Zerging was also a huge issue as the original version did not really allow smaller or casual guilds to get things done. This also has changed, and now Zerging only takes place during PvP open world bosses, which there are non-PvP world boss options for, and Siege and Tax Golem for the most part, which takes place once every 2 weeks. Okay, let's talk about the combat. One of the biggest points of criticism with Throne revolved around its combat. First and foremost, Throne is a game where your combat experience will grow and evolve with your character build and power. The combat that you'll experience early on will continue to enhance to and through the end game. It will for sure be significantly slower early on compared to the end game. Recently, NCSoft has yet again revamped its combat system, now a second time. For those of you who have played in the most recent beta test, unfortunately, you did not have access to this updated combat. Skill specialization is a system recently added to the latest Telandria expansion that effectively works like tripods in Lost Ark and is available starting at around level 20. These skill specializations can completely transform your skill and have created a much more dynamic, faster-paced combat experience by offering more movement, utility, damage, and AoE across all weapons. In addition to this, NCSoft also added the option to remove camera smoothing and reduce the inertia while moving, providing a much more responsive, less clunky experience. Overall, though, there are still a few abilities that can feel a bit heavy and clunky, especially early on, but for the most part, for a tab targeting game, I feel like the combat is pretty solid. Personally, I think it's a lot of fun, especially when your build comes online. The bigger issue, in my opinion, is the targeting. While you do have a lot of options with target prio, I still feel like the targeting can feel a bit off sometimes. Definitely something NC needs to clean up on. It's often said that the combat gets better the longer you play. This is largely in part due to the itemization in Throne. This here is probably the biggest reason why Throne is honestly one of my favorite MMOs personally. In Throne, you have a lot of gear options. Your gear will determine you. How you play your class, how your class feels, what you're weak to, what you're strong to. No single class will be exactly the same, and you will always catch yourself asking, what is this dude's build when coming across a juiced character? In Throne, there is a massive emphasis on your gear, and there is no best in slot combination. It's very much a rock, paper, scissors, pick your poison type of system. Whether you're maximizing damage or defenses, you can't have it all, and your build will always excel and lack in some regard. For example, maybe you have juiced damage and you're strong against melee and ranged attacks, but it's at the cost of being slow and weak to magic. On the point of weaknesses, due to the nature of the pick your poison element in the build, you will never be a walking raid boss no matter how many dollars you put into the game. You'll always have a counter, and the dollar bill will not be able to shield you from everything. Yes, if you're a whale that has spent $50,000 into this game, and this random free-to-play Andy comes and he just happens to be the build that counters you because you're weak to magic and he's staff, you will get shit on. Keck W. The downside to all this, though, is if you're someone that doesn't take interest in builds, you will have to do a little bit of due diligence to find a build from a reputable person, because it is extremely costly, especially if you're free to play, to mess up your build or choose the wrong one. In order to get a build to come online, you'll need to invest a significant amount of time and resources to do so. So what do you do in Throne and Liberty? Content is king. Tell me about the content and loop. Okay, so as mentioned before, Throne has really come a long way and has undergone a significant amount of changes since its launch. It's actually kind of funny to me watching other content creators trying to tell you about what you do in Throne or what kind of game Throne is, but they're clearly just echoing what they've heard from an older version of Throne, clearly not having played it themselves. Contrary to what they're saying, Throne is no longer a large-scale PvP only game. Let me break it down for you. When you reach the end game, you'll have a few main things you'll do on loop, plus at least one major war pretty much every day. First, you have your contracts, which are your daily quests. You'll have 10 of these a day, taking you anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. Then you have your instance dungeons that you'll do about 3 times a day, depending on the dungeons you're running. This will take you around 10 to 30 minutes, depending on your group and experience. However, it can also take hours if your group is less geared and less experienced. Completing contracts and dungeons will not only give you gear upgrade mats and experience, with dungeons giving you actual best in slot gear pieces as well, but it'll also give you open world dungeon tokens known as abyssal contract tokens in game. These open world dungeon tokens are consumed when killing mobs in the open world dungeons, which is the next endgame activity you'll do. Open world dungeons are your BDO-esque content where you just go and farm mobs. Every time you kill a mob, you consume your tokens, and when you reach 0, you're pretty much done. So yes, TLDR, it's BDO grinding, but limited. I do want to add here that they have improved the open world dungeon grind significantly if you've done it before. You get a lot of loot when you go, and you have an option to grind both solo or in a party. Healers and tanks also don't get the shaft because loot is equalized for the most part, so DPS doesn't get significantly more while healers get screwed over like they do in many games. The only difference between solo and party grind is that party grind will be significantly faster and solo grinding will obviously require a lot more gear. Also, I should mention that PvP is enabled at night in-game, which lasts for about 20 minutes. When it comes to contracts, dungeons, and open world dungeons, all of these have caps or limits to how many you can do per day. However, you can stack these things and do them all at once without any diminishing returns. For example, you get 10 contracts per day, but can stack at least 60, so you can just knock out all 60 with no loss once every 6 days if you wish to do so. This stacking system prevents FOMO and allows players to just chill, take a break, or just do other things. These 3 things are your main quote-unquote homework content when it comes to shit you need to get done to progress your character. In addition to this, you have one form of uncapped content, which are called challenge dungeons. These challenge dungeons are the Mythic Plus dungeons of Throne and Liberty. They are the same endgame dungeons, only they have tiers and increase in difficulty the higher you go. Modifiers are added and increased while boss patterns change. These challenge dungeons provide runes upon completion, runes being another form of vertical power that you can equip onto your weapons. On a final note, there are also leaderboards and rankings for these challenge dungeons, giving endgame incentive to PvE Andes. To summarize, you pretty much have contracts and dungeons, which will give you open world dungeon tokens. Then you burn those tokens in the open world dungeon. Then when you finish that, you have the challenge dungeons that you can do with no limit. This is your main endgame loop. It's a PvE loop. Now, some of you may be wondering, I heard there were events every hour. What about those? These events consist of Dominion Wars, which are randomized faction v faction wars with an objective, PvE objective-based events, and world bosses. The Dominion Wars and PvE events don't really have that much that they provide anymore and are relatively lackluster, unless NCSoft plans to have them provide mats linked to the new artifact system that will be coming out later. I'm hoping they are, because the Dominion Wars itself are quite fun, considering it's a PvP mode where you get randomly placed on one of 3 colored factions and you just kill each other with an objective. World bosses have PvP and non-PvP versions. You get multiple bosses that spawn at once, and usually the PvP versions will garner big wars between the top guilds and alliances competing on the server, since these bosses drop important gear. So where does the PvP come in outside of the world bosses? What about the daily major war content? Well, you have arc bosses, which are juiced world bosses that spawn once a week. These guys drop the absolute strongest weapons that are extremely expensive and very prestigious. Korea is about to get their 3rd arc boss, but on global, you'll have 2 in the beginning, both on separate days. These world bosses do have a PvE and PvP version of them. PvE meaning peace, no PvP allowed. Then you have your GVG stuff. Without going too much into detail here, there is a variety of different types of GVG content. For example, Riftstones and Boonstones are a 1v1 GVG where you fight for a territory that allows your guild exclusive access to that respective world boss and or bonus sheet stats every day. You also have cross-server GVG content, otherwise known as inter-server events. Each one of these things take place 1 to 2 times a week, spreading out the content so that pretty much every day there's one major PvP event. Not only are these events the main premier content of Throne and Liberty, but they also give you significant rewards. I mean, exclusive boss farming goes without saying, but you can also get a hefty amount of Solent and Lucent, the currencies of Throne and Liberty. These events do have a cap on how many players can attend, preventing Zergs and allowing for fair GVG fights. Aside from all this, we of course have the pinnacle content of Throne, which is the castle siege. Pretty straightforward here. The occupying alliance will try and defend their castle against everyone else. Whoever wins the castle siege will be rewarded a significant amount of Solent and Lucent. This content is completely open world and any guild is allowed to participate. There's more to the siege than the attempt to take the throne, however. You also have pillage points scattered throughout the castle. These pillage points allow any guild occupying them to steal from the total Solent and Lucent purse. These points allow smaller guilds and alliances to also have purpose in the siege, even if they can't compete for the throne. Once the siege is over, the final bit of content is Golem tax delivery, which also rewards players Solent and Lucent. This content will have the occupying guild attempt to transport a golem to their castle, while other guilds attempt to stop them and steal. These events take place once every other week. Finally, the last thing on the list is Lifeskilling. These are new systems that have been recently implemented, mainly coming in the form of fishing and cooking. The system itself is pretty bare bones and straightforward, but it has been continuing to improve. Cooking dishes provide some really important buffs you want to run, and you have the option to buy, sell, and craft these recipes for yourself. Fishing is also a pretty nice laid-back feature, allowing you to fish out some pretty nice rewards, including mats for cooking. Both these life skills do have gear and vertical progression to them, but they are 100% side content for now. First, I want to start this section by saying that I do plan on making a more in-depth breakdown of the pay to win in a separate video so you can fully understand how it works, but to keep this video from being 17,000 hours long, I'm going to keep this relatively short, or try to, in general. Is it pay to win? The answer is yes. It's for sure pay to win. How is it pay to win? Well, you can purchase the tradable currency. In MMO terms, you can buy and spend gold to buy gear and upgrade your shit. It's about as systematically pay to win as it can be. If you're tolerant to a certain level of pay to win, then you're probably asking, how pay to win is it? In my personal opinion, I'd say it's a bit less pay to win than BDO and Lost Ark, but it's pretty close. It's hard to compare because in some ways it's more and in some ways it's less. NCSoft has a strong reputation of adding egregious pay to win later into their games to the point where they just die. But 10 months into Throne, they have actually reduced and alleviated the pay to win systems for the most part. Here's a bulleted breakdown of the pay to win. You can realistically compete as a free-to-play player and be very close in overall power. You can realistically reach max gear score as a free-to-play player. You can shit on whales as a free-to-play player. Remember, as mentioned before, every class has a counter, pick your poison, rock, paper, scissors system. Whales cannot be min-max gear / power day one. They are gated on their upgrades, keeping the gap in power, especially early on, manageable. When upgrading, you need multiple mats, but each upgrade will require a mat that is not swipeable. You can get the most powerful Arc Boss weapons as a free-to-play player. You just need to join the right guild. We, the players, control how we get these weapons, considering all Arc Boss weapons go to the player guilds first. You can whale for the most powerful Arc Boss weapons as well, but it will be a while before you can do so because they are rarely sold early on and you're waiting for guilds to sell them. Most guilds will keep them within their guild because your guild is significantly stronger the more you have, allowing you to effectively farm more, which is why most people actually say Arc Boss weapons are more guild to win than pay to win. The cost to swipe for capped gear is cheap compared to other Korean pay to win games. By capped, I mean max gear. Like you can't get any more power. Pre-Talandry, it costs around $500-ish USD in Korea to min-max if you're going to just swipe for all of it, not including Arc Boss weapons. Arc Boss weapons go for anywhere from $350 to $1,200 USD in Korea. There is a big fluctuation because there aren't that many that get listed overall. If it's consistent with Korea, it should cost you anywhere roughly from 1k USD to 4k USD to get a fully maxed out full power character with double Arc Boss weapons on global, assuming you're doing the very bare minimum and you're pretty much buying everything. To add some perspective here, this is the equivalent of max quality gear, S-8 weapon, 1010 stone, and Lost Ark. You can't go any more vertical. And that about wraps up this game review. I really wanted to get an updated review on this game for you guys because the game really has changed quite a bit since its start and even since the beta test as well. I know a lot of you guys are thinking about putting in a considerable amount of time and even money for some of you into this game, and hopefully this game review will help you with that decision. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe and come follow me on Twitch. I'll be streaming a lot of Throne Liberty in the coming days. I'll see you guys in the next video.